Hi, guys, it's Mrs. Britton again, and I am back with you today to review what we've done so far on our spooky paragraph writing and to talk about what we're moving on to today. If you have not done day 1 and day 2, you will have to go back and listen to those instructions, and then we will move on from there to today. So do not try to just start with today. Definitely go back to day 1 if you haven't done that yet, and then day 2, and then today. So again, we're writing spooky paragraph writing because we're working on making those really strong, good 7-up sentences. The first day, we picked our setting and wrote our descriptive words, and then wrote our introduction sentence and talked about what that introduction was going to be used for so that we had a really strong introduction so we knew what to write for our details. Yesterday, we took these 3 words, seeing, hearing, feeling, or whatever your 3 words were, and we made details out of them. My first detail was I looked up at the ceiling and I could see shadows dancing around even though there was no light. That is a sentence about seeing, even though it does not say I could see or I saw. When I looked up, obviously I was seeing something. Then detail 2 was about hearing. As I stared at the creepy shadows, I heard a loud slam coming from upstairs. I knew the house was supposed to be empty, so I couldn't explain what the noise was. And we talked about how the reason we knew that the house was supposed to be empty was because we said in our introduction that it was an abandoned house. So of course it was supposed to be empty. Then in our third detail, it was supposed to be what we were feeling. As I stood in the entryway, I felt a cold wind blow down the stairs. The hair on my arms stood on end. So those are our 3 details. It tells what we were seeing, what we were hearing, and what we were feeling. I'm going to go back through and read my introduction all the way down through my third detail so I can see if I want to make any changes. Because if you'll remember, yesterday we talked about how this is your writing and you're going to want to make any changes as you go along because you can make changes anytime you want. You might be thinking, oh, I thought about what I wrote yesterday and I wish I would have written this. Well, it's your writing. You can definitely put any change you want to make. The atmosphere in the abandoned house made the hair on my arms stand on end. I wasn't sure what I was seeing, hearing, or feeling. I looked up at the ceiling and I could see shadows dancing around even though there was no light. As I stared at the creepy shadows, I heard a loud slam coming from upstairs. I knew the house was supposed to be empty, so I couldn't explain what the noise was. As I stood in the entryway, I felt a cold wind blow down the stairs. The hair on my arms stood on end. Now, if you're at home, my suggestion is read it out loud to yourself once and then see if there's anyone in your house that will let you read it out loud again. Something that I noticed that I feel like is a problem on mine is I've told you I really didn't want you to start each sentence with I could see, I could hear, I could feel. I don't want each of your sentences to start the same way. It's not a huge deal in 3rd grade, but if you are finished and you're noticing that you have used the same sentences over and over, you might want to change that. It's just going to make you a better writer. I noticed that I said in detail 2, as I stared at the creepy shadow, and in detail 3, as I stood in the entryway. I'm going to change that to something else, so I'm not using as I again. How about I stood frozen? No, because it's a cold wind. Petrified in the entryway. And I'm going to get rid of this comma. I stood petrified in the entryway and I felt a cold wind blow down the stairs. I already had in my introduction that it made the hair on my arms stand on end. So I definitely don't want to put that again. So see how easy it is to make those changes? Oops, detail 3. I stood petrified in the entryway and I felt a cold wind blow down the stairs. I'm just going to leave that right there like it is. That brings us up to, if you've reread that, you've made any changes you want to make, that brings us up to today. And today we're talking about the conclusion. And I don't know if you guys remember what I told you about your introduction, your 3 details, and your conclusion. I told you that your introduction was where you tell them what you're going to tell them. So let's look at our introduction. I'm telling you that I'm getting ready to tell you what I was seeing, hearing, and feeling. So I'm telling you what I'm going to be telling you. In my 3 details, I'm telling you. I'm just telling you all about what was going on, right? I'm telling you. In your conclusion, you're going to tell them what you already told them. So I need to wrap this up with what I already told them. I'm always going to go back to my introduction and think to myself in my own words, what was I saying? I was saying that I was terrified because of all the things that I was seeing. So if I was going to use my first sentence stem, I would say, I have never been so scared in my whole, got my fingers on the wrong keys again, scared in my whole life. That was what basically I was just telling you all about, correct? If I want to have a twist on the story, I could say, I was so relieved when my pet cat ran down the stairs, or my pet parrot came squawking down the stairs, or my friend came down the stairs and I could see that they'd been playing a joke on me the whole time. Something like that. That was the last time that I ever stepped foot in an abandoned house. Let's write that one down. Ever stepped into an abandoned house. I will never forget feeling so scared that I couldn't move. So there are a lot of options there. There are a lot of different things you can type. I barely escaped with my life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off everything that I wrote except the first one, because I don't want you guys just copying word for word mine without even going back. Okay. So I have never been so scared in my whole life would be a great conclusion. You've already typed it here. So scared in my whole life, period. Get rid of these extra things. So it just says, I have never been so scared in my whole life. I am going to copy and paste that into the next slide where it says conclusion. I have never been so scared in my whole life. I have noticed for some reason that I have different size font on each page, and I'm kind of trying to make sure it's all the same because it's going to make it so much easier when I copy and paste. I have never been so scared in my whole life. So now I'm going to read this again all together. The atmosphere in the abandoned house made the hair on my arms stand on end. I wasn't sure what I was seeing, hearing, or feeling. I looked up at the ceiling and I could see shadows dancing around, even though there was no light. As I stared at the creepy shadows, I heard a loud slam coming from upstairs. I knew the house was supposed to be empty, so I couldn't explain what the noise was. I stood petrified in the entryway, and I felt a cold wind blow down the stairs. I have never been so scared in my whole life. So that's my whole paragraph. Once you type all this today, you are completely finished, but I'm going to ask you to do one more thing today. I'm going to ask you to go back up and look through all of these things. So you're going to click through every single one of them and see, did every single sentence begin with a capital letter? And I checked mine and they did. Did every single sentence have an end mark? I checked mine and they did. Now, if you tell me that you checked it and you move the check mark over into your box, and then when I look back at your slides, if you didn't have a capital letter and an end mark, I'm going to take off points because I asked you to check. You told me you checked. You got to tell me if it's right. I fixed the spelling on words with a squiggle under them. If you guys remember, I spelled abandoned wrong at one time and I had to fix it. And then my fingers got away from me and I had to fix something else. So I already fixed mine. I read my sentences aloud to myself and they made sense. I'm going to want you to also read them aloud to someone else and see if they say they made sense. So then I'm going to move that check mark. Please text me or message me if you think it didn't make sense, because you could be my friend that says, hey, I don't like the way you said that. Oh, here's that. Look at me. I was already way ahead of you. I read my sentences out loud to a friend and he or she said that they made sense, and your friend can be anyone in your family. I used 3 details from my introduction and I kept them in the order that they were written. So here I put seeing first, then hearing, then feeling. Seeing first, then hearing, then feeling. That's very important. Make sure you did all of those things. So those today are slides 11 to fill out, 12, and 13. Shouldn't take you that long, because once you have 11 filled out, you just go back and text it. But then this slide will take a little bit longer because you have to go back and double check all of those things that we double checked. I would love to ask you if there are any questions. I wish you were right here in front of me. The only part left that we have to do is the next day that I come and do one of these, we're going to copy and paste all of this into our gray box. So just make sure you get every single one of these done, and then it will be so easy to do the last part. I hope that you've enjoyed writing your spooky story. I hope that you were able to let your imagination run wild. And since you're at home, maybe your relatives or your siblings have had a good time listening to your story that you're reading. So for today, that is all we're going to have to do. So happy writing and enjoy making your story as spooky as you can.